All right, welcome back and thank you for staying with us on Daybreak this morning. Now let's move on to our discussion. According to statistics, not less than 271 collapsed buildings represent 50% of a total of 541 recorded cases in the country between 1974 and 2002. Now, out of these figures recorded within the past 10 years, at least 531 persons have died as the menace of crumbling structures continues to plague the country or plague the nation's built industry. Now, the statistics also revealed that of the 271 collapsed recorded in the past decade, 115 cases representing 42.4% of the total number were recorded in Lagos State. Now, this morning, to discuss more on this worrisome development is the Chairman, Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, that's Corbon, Dr. Samson Okpalua, right here in our studio. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
Let us also extend the congratulations of Trust TV to your inauguration, even though you have been in the office for a couple of months. It's your first time here, so we want to congratulate you for seeing this position at such a critical time in the life of our country.
Thank you very much.
So just before you ask the question, it's also worthy to note that the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria is a corporate body empowered by law, among other things, to regulate the practice of building construction, maintenance and management in Nigeria. So regulating and controlling the practice of building profession in all its aspects and ramifications, and also conducting professional accreditation of tertiary academic institutions and training facilities for the building profession.
Thank you, Usina. For the average Nigerian who is listening from their home, with the second stanza of this introduction, the question will be, where has Corbon been all this while? Because every time we see a building collapse, that's the politicians use it as the opportunity to shine, threatening to bring down thunder and brimstone on people who are culpable, and sort of play to public sentiments. And after that incident, we hear nothing about it. We know from the same Banana Island there had been an incident that's less than 2 years old, that everybody cried about. I mean, the other story building that went down. Now in the same Banana, we are seeing more incidents. In fact, the government is saying that I think about 10 buildings or so will be brought down. And when you go through the documentation and everything, the same government probably handed out the building plan approval, and had gone round. You see them put paint houses and say stop construction. And after a while, construction continues and nobody says anything. What exactly has been happening in our built sector?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to be exposed to the Nigerian public. I want to say Barka de Sallah too, just like you have been expressing this felicitation to our countrymen and women. Building as a profession has been with us since the 18th century. And you would realize also that every animal, every group of species of animals, they provide for their own habitation. And shelter is a fundamental need of man. In fact, indeed, is the second on the hierarchy of needs. So building has been with us for a long time, from the time men started to aggregate and to provide for themselves. As a Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, our profession was recognized by law in 1989. A decree was enacted, and that decree transmuted into the present Act, B13, Laws of the Federal Republic 2004, which is Section 1, Subsection 2 is what your colleague just read out as our mandate. We have been around, and our membership spreads across the country, and we are the experts in the production of buildings and the construction management of buildings in use and during construction, and in fact pre-design too, we have inputs. When you talk about building in the economy, it's a subset of the built environment. We have other built environment structures. So all of them together is called built environment. Now for building structures, we are the heart of the production. That's the builders. And that's why we are called builders. When a builder builds houses. Now, there are other actors that come to play because we are the professionals in the process of putting the building up and of managing it until it's the end of its useful lifespan. But we have to do this under laws and in collaboration with other professionals. The recent collapse that you alluded to has raised a lot of the challenges we find in the industry. And what are those challenges? You find the challenge of poor governance. You cannot build without design. And designs are not implemented without approval. And the approving authority is by land use decree of 1977, which we are still operating, and trusts the responsibility of approval on the state governments, not even the federal government. So when you find the state governor now accusing the federal government, it's strange because planning approval, development approval is domiciled in the authority of the state government by the act. And in the Federal Capital Territory is in the Ministry of Federal Capital Territory. Nobody should run away from that responsibility. Now, whether it is being implemented to the letter and correctly is the issue. Now, how are we implementing it? You will find that in the building environment, there are a number of reasons that the sort of collapse we are talking about can happen. It could be regulatory. And in regulatory balance, there are different aspects of regulation. The material that is to be used in the construction of building is regulated. That's why we have the Standard Organization of Nigeria. Every item that is put into a building project has a standard. And that's what is captured and defined. And that's what the owner of the building pays for. That's what the contractor or whoever is paid also to implement is supposed to put in. And if it doesn't put that in, it can cause failure. Then who works on the site is regulated. Nobody should be carrying out an assignment for which is not licensed for. We have various categories of professionals that interface on a building project, and each one has got its specific rules and responsibilities. There are boundaries, and we have bodies that regulate and license this. If you cross boundaries, you'll be carrying out a job for which you are not competent.
All right, just to further expand this conversation, on a number of times when we have had the privilege to visit building sites outside the shores of this country, right before you get into the site, there are all kinds of what you call certifications by the gates. If you go into a pharmacy, you will see them boldly hanging license that permits them to practice. The barber shops has a license that permits him sort of to operate as a legal business. So you will find safety clearance, you'll find all kinds of people, including the regulatory platforms, saying this is strictly under regulations and they are permitted to do these things and all kinds of compliance. Why do we find it difficult to get those kind of seals around building sites in Nigeria to sort of assure people around the environment or Nigerians in general that this is properly regulated? And where we can't find those, then it becomes imperative that we raise the alarm about what is going on there about suspicions that whatever is going on there could be illegal.
Yeah. Ordinarily, common practice demands that a building should be erected in a regulated environment, which means there should be boundaries. And by law and convention, which I'll come to later in our country, every site should have what we call a site board that indicates all the professional actors on that project. And once you move into the site, excuse me, you find that there are even areas that you cannot go because of health and safety reasons, because the site is an environment of hazards, and there are different levels of hazards. So that is why you have that certification by the health authorities. And when you move into the site, what you can do and what you cannot do is also regulated. So on that board, you are to have the name of the professionals that are involved in that project, and by their name, you will notice that they will also put beside them the organizations that regulate them. If you are an architect, it is clear that ACON regulates you. If you are an engineer, it is clear that COREN regulates you. If you are a builder, it is clear. So, but we more or less do not follow these rules, especially on the smaller projects. It's mainly the big government projects that you find this. It is mandatory, it is in the conditions of contract that should be done. And why many people do not do that is that they don't obey. They don't have those people, but they present themselves to the planning authorities as having them before the approval is given. And that is where the issue of monitoring comes in. Because it's not just that you have approved for development, you must ensure that what you approved is actually what is being done on site.
Okay, now you've actually been speaking on general terms, but let's talk about Lagos State, where there's, frequency in building collapses. In your opinion, what would you attribute to the reason behind the frequent collapses, building collapses in Lagos State?
Thank you very much. Let me say that when buildings collapse, they are unexpected. The entire profession of building is meant to ensure stability and fit for use at all times during its useful lifespan. So we don't expect buildings to collapse. So it is an exception rather than the norm. But when it begins to happen with such rapidity and regularity as we are seeing, especially in Lagos, is indicative of a systemic failure. And that systemic failure is, from the recent studies we have carried out, in about 5 collapses, it's about regulation, and it's about monitoring, and it's about the place of revenue drive as against correct practices. So if you find a situation where a contravention has been done and I can pay for the contravention as a penalty, it will not encourage me to continue to meet up with that condition. And most of these conditions that we have in the building construction industry are for safety purposes. They are not superfluous. They may look superfluous, but it is when the accident happens that you realize that they are actually a result of past experiences that science and studies have indicated that it should be done. So when you look at particularly Lagos, it's a commercial capital of the country, there's a lot of need for building infrastructure, and it is very profitable because of the high demand. There's a huge demand and the cost is enormous. There's a lot of funds that goes into it, and so many business interests are involved in a building development But however, it is important that we should ensure that the rule of law applies on our building sites, just like every other facet of the society. Why it continues to happen, I must say, is because there are no sanctions for the past, no major sanctions for the past collapses. So if there is no sanction, there's no deterrent. I don't think in the past 5 years, for instance, thank you for the statistics you reeled out, how many people have been sanctioned. And
when you talk about this sanction, without cutting you,
yes,
we begin to wonder where the sanction should come from. For instance, in the bulletin, as you would have heard, the lawyers are calling for one of their own to be debarred. What has Cobon done about its own professionals that have been culpable in all of these collapses, especially the ones coming from Lagos, before we then begin to talk about what the Lagos state government or the federal government have done?
Thank you very much. Building is a multidisciplinary activity. You find that the architect designs, the engineers design, the builder builds.
Yes.
Okay? So when a building collapses, we have in common, we have what we call the Project Evaluation and Monitoring Unit in all the states of the country. We will visit. First of all, our intention of visiting is to help see what can be mitigated on that site so that there is no further loss of life or contingent danger to other surrounding structures. Secondly, what happened? Thirdly, who is the builder in charge? We have not been able to find any of those structures that the builder was in charge. That's the bane of collapse in our country. People are being engaged to build who are not builders.
But I've heard these arguments, sorry, Usena, from your contemporary, the ACON presidents, about who should be in charge. The architects will always tell you because they designed, they are the project managers and everything rise and fall with them. The builders will always tell you that because they are to manage the process, they should be in charge. So there's always the argument about who calls the shot with regards to the development of a building as the project manager. So who should have been in charge?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question, and it is, we tend to bring our feelings as Nigerians into every sector of our life endeavor. The question of being in charge does not arise. I said earlier that it's a multidisciplinary activity. The law that sets us up says what each person should do on a building site. Now, when you come to the actual implementation of the building, casting concrete, laying blocks, fixing, that is the builder's job. No architect will come and say that is his responsibility. So what we are saying, and there is no argument, because building is not only being produced in Nigeria, it's a worldwide endeavor. People are constructing houses. We have colleagues all over. We schooled internationally, and we are still schooling internationally. So it's not here that we'll be fighting over turf. It only shows that there is some local ingress in the way we reason and think. The question of being in charge does not really arise. What is important is do what you are professionally equipped, licensed, and an expert in doing on a building site. It's not a chieftaincy title. It's not, you don't inherit it. You learn it, you acquire the competence, you deploy it for the benefit of your client. So I don't think there's any argument on that. But when you come to the day-to-day, from the day you start clearing site, it is the responsibility of he does the clearing of the site. He digs the foundation, he supervises the artisans that work. Building as a profession, except when we have what we call system building, in which you manufacture the building and come and assemble it on site. It's is a continuous activity. So somebody has to be in charge of that continuity, and that is the builder.
All right, so let's go back to Lagos. Within 24 hours, we've actually seen 2 building collapses, and we've seen the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu shut down some construction sites within the Banana Island. Now, what's the risk of the same occurrence, the same building collapse happening, to properties, similar properties within Banana Island?
I want to commend the Governor, His Excellency Babatunde Sanwo-Olu, for visiting the site and seeing himself, not waiting for reports, because one, it demonstrates the value of life and obedience to the rule of law. Whenever a building collapses, there are so many reasons why it may collapse, but if you narrow down to Banana Island, for instance, there are questions. Thank God he says that they have set up an independent committee to investigate. What they will be investigating is what was the design meant for? What were the assumptions in the design? What type of design? And how has it been implemented? Who are the implementers? What are the factors that necessitated the decisions they took in the process of construction? For instance, we as builders, we have what we call builders' tools of practice. And what are these? In every building project, you must have the construction plan and program. This is what I will do at this time, and so and so, from one stage to another, and so on and so forth. There must be a construction methodology and technology. How am I going to do it? How do you achieve this objective? And it's not something that you just think out of the box. You have to sit down and, as a professional, have it all written down. So from day to day, according to your program. So I can move into that site today and say, what's your plan for today? And you tell me this is where you want to go. How do you want to get there? I'll see it in your construction plan methodology. Then there is the project health and safety plan. How are you going to ensure that this can be done in an environment where everybody is safe? Because it's not just to work, you have to work in a safe environment. Then, of course, you have the project quality plan, quality management plan. How do you ensure that what is being put in this is the right quality? The designer has certain expectations. He has standards of quality that is already embedded in the design. So the builder as an implementer is supposed to work towards that. For instance, he can say, my concrete is grade 30. That is what I am designing. Now, concrete is a product. I have to mix sand, cement, water, and stone to get the concrete. So that's the job of the builder. The builder will now mix this to achieve that strength. And so when the engineer comes, the structural engineer is coming to find out, did the concrete you cast here meet that strength? So it's my responsibility also to have a quality plan. To say, anytime I'm mixing, I'll take a sample. Which when the engineer comes, he's going to test the strength. Then he say, oh yeah, I met the standard. All this, you see, building is not just a common activity. We have moved past the time when we're using mud bricks, called tumbeli in the north, to build houses where everybody can just begin to gather mud and they say that is what they are. No, we have moved beyond that.
All right. Usena raised a point that I would like to follow up on. In Lagos particularly, we are beginning to see a different kind of development, largely because of what the state government calls land reclamation. Banana Island is an artificial island, if you like, a good part of the linkage between Victoria Island and Ekpe, where some of those mighty buildings are sitting on. In fact, if you use the local buses, they call them sandfield. And today we have a mega project known as the Eco Atlantic City.
Yes.
We have seen, even from videos online, that in places where they have done similar things, like in France, in Dubai, for instance, which is a pace setter for those kind of developments, that the substructure, the columns underpinning those structures drive very deep into the soil to touch base with the natural earth, no matter how long that base is, to provide some level of stability in the event of massive storm or extreme weathers, as the case may be. From your experience and exposure around all of these artificial islands we have in Nigeria, do you think we are deploying similar technologies and safety measures to, because these collapses are beginning to look like we are just putting tons of loads on loose base, and when there is a little shift, everything just gives way. Is that exactly, because that's how it plays out in my mind, and a number of Nigerians, we are beginning to come to the conclusion that all these artificial islands are beginning to, we say nature is now fighting back and they are beginning to give. Is that what is happening?
Well, let me say that I come from the north central zone, the geopolitical zone of this country, and the decision to be reclaiming sea when we have a lot of land in Nigeria is a different kettle of fish. I don't subscribe to it, but that is what is happening in Nigeria, and maybe because people do not want to move to the hinterland to develop the rest of the country. A few weeks ago, I was studying why Nigeria decided to establish Abuja. And one of the reasons is the congestion in Lagos. And if at that time, in 1976, Lagos was congested, you can imagine what it is now. And why we have not yet taken that political and national decision to move into the hinterland, and if we are a country. But having said that, I'm also, as a professional builder, I can build anywhere. Buildings can be erected anywhere. In the sea, you can build. So it depends on the preparation and the information you have about the terrain in which you are going to build. For instance, on a reclaimed land, just like you said, the type of foundation you are talking is called piling. It might interest you that oil platforms are buildings actually, but floating on the sea. And people live there. So it's possible to build on the sea. And then all you need to do is to get the geotechnics and the structural engineering right, that you are building on a foundation that will support the structure that is coming up on top. A cursory look at the collapse that happened in Lagos, the information I have from those who visited site was that it was actually an accident that happened. And in every building, even in this your own multi-story building, there are some core walls here, the ones that carry and where the columns are right up. If anything should happen to any of them, the entire integrity of the structure is compromised. So it's possible that even the design could have been okay, but at the same time, there are some structures that have collapsed because of improper design, inadequate design, or even you can design correctly and it is wrongly implemented. I gave an example of how concrete is specified. Now it could also be that the fluidity, the continuity of the structural components were not maintained. If you go to visit some sites, you find that while they are casting, because of improper planning, which I mentioned as one of the core areas of the builder of programming, you are casting concrete and suddenly it is late and you didn't prepare for night casting, so you stopped
halfway.
But that stop that day is called a construction gap. There is now a joint, unintended joint you have created there. The structural engineer did not envisage it. So, if in the process of construction and because of your own tardiness or lack of expertise, you created a construction joint where it ought not to be, it's a structural failure waiting to happen. So there are so many reasons why such a thing should happen. And that's why we are saying, let's deploy expertise to handle our issues. The time where anybody thinks they can just do anything has passed in this country.
Okay, so what do you think building collapse, the effect of building collapse is on the economy, especially when it comes to property investment?
It's massive. The effect is huge. First of all, it's an embarrassment to those of us who are in the built environment industry, because our industry is an international industry. We belong to bodies outside this country. We go for conferences and they keep asking us what is happening in your country. It's an embarrassment to us. Secondly, the nation may not have taken notice of the fact that if we allow this to continue, any foreigner coming into Nigeria will not be sure of the safety and stability of our structures in Nigeria. So your wife will tell you, are you going to Nigeria? Are you sure of the hotel you are going to stay in? That's what's going to happen. So we must be seen to put a break to these unfortunate incidences. And as for investment, how can somebody put up a 7-story building and in one day it's like a pack of cards, it collapses? That's a huge loss. And the loss is not just to that individual, it's the loss to our economy. Then need I talk about the loss of human lives? Anytime that buildings collapse, especially during construction, human lives are lost. And we don't even hear those who are responsible, giving some sort of support to the families of these people.
Compensation.
And there is what we call in construction law, there is insurance for the works. There is contractors all risk insurance. Everybody that comes to, even you as a visitor, there's a measure of cover for you. And it is mandatory for every building project. But it is not enforced. And this enforcement can only be done by the planning authorities. But you see, like Lagos and Abuja, the planning authorities cannot be everywhere. For instance, the Federal Capital Territory is a construction site. Don't mind that our capital is here now, but it's a huge construction site. Everywhere there's construction going on. So how many people will you recruit in the planning development control, they call it in Abuja, and planning LAPSCA or something in Lagos to go around all this? You can't recruit everybody, but you can use a PPP arrangement. There are private sector practitioners who are in this field. They can now stand as an extension of your regulatory functions to make sure that these things are done properly. These are the suggestions we've been giving government. You can't do it alone. You cannot be everywhere unless you want to employ every Nigerian. And it's not possible. And that's why our cost of manpower in government has been blowing up, because government wants to do everything by civil servants. It's not possible.
So you're discussing outsourcing more or less, as we have with the EFCCs taking private lawyers, engaging private lawyers to pursue recovery or whatever, and take a percentage of whatever is due to the government. Is that the arrangement? Is that what you imply by the PPP?
Yes, that's it. You see, even if you want to deploy expertise, you may not even get the expertise in government. If you want to deploy experience, you may not get the experience in government. So it's good for government to synergize with the professional bodies, and then you get these consultants who will now take responsibility for this supervision and monitoring, and then reporting back. They are not to do any other thing apart from ensuring that what the planning authorities have approved is what is being implemented. And if it's not being implemented, they report back.
So, just drilling down with what Hussaina have said, and maybe largely because of our own environment, because in other advanced countries, even the building of private houses are not undertaken by individuals. They're undertaken by firms, mortgage firms, in conjunction with the insurance company. And then individuals only approach the mortgage firm, indicate interest, and move into a property after paperwork have been completed. That gap in Nigeria means every individual practically becoming a house builder, as the case may be, and people finding it difficult to engage the services of builders, and now making merchants or other semi-skilled workers in the site who are probably helped in building 5-10 houses. They say, what is there that the engineer is doing that they cannot do? Is it not to put one block on top of the other and then get a carpenter to hit a roof on the house and you get the zinc plates and you are in? What is the economic danger, not now to the society, but to the individual who circumvents the use of professionals? Because in other places, you even see that when they are done building houses, you see mesh transferring into the rooms. Everywhere is taken over by Spirogyra, and then they start using tiles on the walls, all kind of remediation to make that place habitable. How do you explain the danger that one imposes on himself when you circumvent the use of professionals to put up a structure where you hope to you and your family would cohabit?
It's a lot of danger. The danger majorly is, one, the fact that you will not get value for money. Two, is that you stand the risk of even losing your investment. Three, you may also lose your life in it. And lastly is that you are getting a substandard product for paying for a standard product. And why this happens is also something that we need to address as a nation. You know, there's got to be structures in place. The housing mortgage system in the country still has to be improved and expanded. The cost of funds is a huge disincentive even to investment in buildings. So you find that many people who are building using quacks, because what you are saying is quacks engaging in buildings. Yes, there's a possibility of people thinking they have the expertise because they have been used by experts before. But no two buildings are the same. Just like you are not building in exactly the same location. The expert now has the ability to determine what is right at a particular time. Now the person who was building under instruction does not have that background knowledge. And that's why you find Spirogyra and Moko and all those things that you were saying. Many houses in Abuja here have that challenge. You have ingress of water coming in. It's simply because the damp-proof course was not professionally handled. Or they think that it's even a waste of time. You know, somebody says, this is German floor, it's okay. They just can't. What is German floor? You know, they don't even know the right name. So if you want to build right, you engage a builder. That's what we say. You know, but you can decide it's your money. It's your resources. However, the Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria is an association that created by the housing policy and is supposed to be supported and expanded so that the type of mortgage system and housing provision system that's available in the Western world can also be available to us. Ideally, it is the affluent and the rich that decides what they want for themselves because they can afford it. But the young, upwardly mobile youth just wants a simple accommodation. He doesn't need to bother himself about building. He can buy into one, and he still has lifespan, a lot of length of life ahead of him, and he's in employment. Those are the things that once the mortgage institutions are satisfied that they can pay back, they will buy the house for him or her, and she stays there. That's how it works. In fact, it will lower corruption in our country because everybody's looking for money, and sometimes this desire for money is because of the necessities of life. If we make things a little bit easier for life to go on, the hunger for money that leads people into negative tendencies will be reduced.
Interesting. It's been a wonderful conversation with Dr. Samson Okbalua, the president of chairman of Cobon in Nigeria, who has taken us through what has been an eye-opener on where to situate the recent frequencies of building collapse in Nigeria, and especially in Lagos State. He said something that is instructive to me. I've heard a similar proverb used once before by a good friend, Dr. Andy Heme. He said, no matter how long you have practiced as a nurse, it doesn't qualify you as a doctor. So no matter how long you have practiced as a quack or as a mason, it doesn't qualify you as an architect or as a builder. Stay within your sphere of specialization is another important information that he has preached this morning. We want to thank you very much for finding time to be here and for sharing your public holidays. We know how precious these rest days are. We have had to itch into your own. It has been worthwhile talking to you, and I hope viewers at home have learned a lesson or two. Those who are preparing to build must have taken a lesson from your admonition. Those who are already building, I'm sure would be thinking twice about some of the things you have said. And for us as a people and as a country, I hope this government is listening and it's ready to do what is right, especially the incoming administration. We want to thank you for what has been a very interesting show. I am Sunday Michael Ogu. Let's do this again tomorrow.
And I'm Dashan Husseina Usman. Have a wonderful week ahead.